years ago, my mother had a friend of hers at the house, a Jehovah's Witness woman. And this woman, she lived in Southern California, but she was from Oregon, which is north of California. And that's where she grew up. And she had a lot of property with a lot of woods out there. And I remember one day she and my mom were having a conversation, and my mom told me about the conversation she had with this woman. The woman was telling her about how people just need to calm down about this Bigfoot stuff. She says there's not just one creature walking around, hiding in the woods. She says that's not what it is. Because back then, people heard about Bigfoot and they thought, oh, come on, a giant hairy being that looks kind of like an ape and a man, a monkey and a man, gorilla man, whatever you want to call it, ape man, walking around in the woods. Bigfoot, how stupid does that sound, right? But this woman, and this is years ago, this is when I was a child, which, I'm 51 now, so, a lot of years ago, Bigfoot wasn't a big thing, a big topic of conversation back then. But anyway, this woman said that those things lived in her yard. She had a house that was in the woods. It's where she grew up, in the woods, big property. And out in the property, she said these creatures were there all the time. And she says, we didn't bother them, they didn't bother us. It was kind of normal to them, right? It was normal for those things to be around. She said there were males, there were females, they had kids. And it's amazing that way back then, this woman could describe something that so many eyewitnesses report as seeing today. Now, you might not believe that these things can even possibly exist, and that's for you. That's your choice, right? Won't believe it till you see it. And if they exist, then how come nobody's found their bodies? Nobody. Well, how do you know? How do you know? How do you know these things aren't found, aren't killed, aren't captured, studied? How do you know? You think that they're just gonna, who's they anyway? Who's the they that's gonna report it? Do you think the media's gonna be informed? Hey, just want to let you know we got these creatures out here. Why are these things? Why are they so controversial, and why is it so secret? I'll tell you what, if you really think that their bodies haven't been found, it's because you haven't heard a report of it. There's a lot of things that aren't reported to you, to the public, when it comes to news. You should know that by now. There are things that are kept very, very secret. You ever hear on the news where somebody had a miracle happen in their life in the name of Jesus? Does the news report that stuff to you? No? But maybe you hear testimony from other people that have either experienced a miraculous healing or been the hands that God used to lay on those people to receive their healing. Maybe it doesn't go on the news, so you might not believe it, that stuff's possible, but there are testimonies from people all around the world. Testimonies given about what Jesus has done for them and what Jesus has done for others. Now, you might call yourself a believer. You never saw Jesus with your eyes. Nobody gave you a great film of Jesus. Has anybody ever filmed him in the skies? You believe in angels. Did anybody ever film an angel that you're convinced, well, there they are? Nobody filmed Jesus for you? Do the movies Jesus count? The movies that Jesus is in? The shows he's on? Is that Jesus to you? Those are actors, you guys. But you still, there's many of you that still confess to believing in Jesus, yet you can't believe in something unless the news reports it or the government shares it. There are so many eyewitness testimonies of these creatures, and the reason that you might not believe that these things exist is because you're not listening to the testimonies. Why do you think so many people don't believe in Jesus? They don't listen to the testimonies. They don't want to hear those testimonies, which, you know, by the way, the gospel means good word, good report, good news, good speak. The news doesn't want to share the gospel, especially about Jesus Christ. They want to share bad news, crazy reports, crazy speech, division. They want you in fear. Drama sells. It's a fact. Encouraging Jesus videos on YouTube don't have as many viewers as crazy stuff that's full of drama and violence and whatever you can imagine. That stuff sells. Gets way more views than Jesus loves you videos. Now, just because you haven't heard something reported on the news or reported from your governments or even your religious leaders, right? Media, politics, religion. 3 6s. And you're expecting them to tell you what's going on? Well, anyway, back to the story about this woman. So this woman that was a friend of my mom, she said those things were all over her property, and it was normal to her growing up. Now, today I hear so many reports of people seeing these things. I personally know people that have seen these things, and I believe that I once saw one of these things as well, and it was super fast because I was driving as a passenger in a car coming from Arizona to California in the high mountains, and I noticed to the left of my view across the road there were these cows that were grazing under a bridge in a big field. And then I noticed that that's, we were driving across this bridge, so the cows were over in the field where the bridge ended, grazing upon the pastures. And then to my right, I noticed something that was kind of crouching like like the catcher in a baseball game when he sits behind the batter, and kind of that way he sits, where he's kind of on his feet, kind of almost like diamond shaped. That's kind of how this thing was sitting, and it was right next to a big pile of wood, like not cut wood, but we're talking wood from trees, branches. I don't know if they were broken or if they were cut. I saw a big pile of wood branches, and this thing blended in really well with that pile of wood branches. It blended, like the coloring of it. It looked like, you blended into the environment. But I took a snapshot of what I saw in my mind, and this thing was huge. And then I find out later that they are reported amongst the rangers and the sheriff's department that is around that area, that they have reports of those creatures all the time in that area that I had passed by. Now, I don't want to prove to you that Bigfoot or Sasquatch exists, but I want to just ask, is there an answer? Is there a biblical answer? Is there anything in history that speaks about the existence of these creatures. I mean, there are plenty of paintings on cave walls, cave wall art from the natives that were here before you and I. There's a lot of these cave art, carvings, paintings, whatever they are, that had these creatures on them interacting with man. So, if they do exist, what or who are they? We all know the biblical account of Noah's day, that there were Nephilim on the earth. And Nephilim is the hybrid. It's a being that is part messenger, called a watcher. You get that from Enoch. In the book of Enoch, he identifies them as the watchers. Jude and the book of Genesis describe them as messengers. You might say no, it describes them as angels. Well, angels are called messengers. That's what angelos means in Greek. It's messenger. So these messengers that are of a species of angel called watcher have offspring with women. They impregnate human women, and the women give birth to beings that were known to be giants. And the book of Enoch does talk about how also not only was there tampering with the human genetics. It's where we get the book of Genesis, genetics, origin, your gene code. That's what it means. So, these beings that are watchers and messengers give birth to offspring. Their women give birth to their offspring. Human women mixed with some angelic DNA to have giants. But it says that not only did they tamper with the genes of human beings, but they sinned against the animals. All sorts, reptiles, birds, fish life, beasts on earth. And they created beings of their own. Right? Maybe that's where dinosaurs came from, because these giants needed food. And what man had here for the giants wasn't sustaining them. So perhaps what their fathers did was, because those guys, trust me, they had technology that surpasses anything imaginable today that we have. And this is way back then. They know medical science way back then. They knew it way better than any doctor or scientist today. So these beings definitely knew how to take genes and splice them and dice them and mix them up and create abominations. Taking God's stuff, mixing it all up, perhaps convincing people, hey, it comes from earth, it's organic, it's natural, why wouldn't God want this? Why would he create things of the earth if he didn't want you to use them, right? So they took what belonged to God and they did a little tampering and mixture with it and produced abominations. Man takes God's stuff all the time. Man takes God's stuff and uses God's stuff to make bombs and such, to annihilate one another. Now I'm going to go hit the gym real quick. So I'll pause the video here and we'll talk a little bit more about these things. what they might be. And this is just going to be my opinion, so I don't think my opinion really matters much. But if you want to know it, and maybe you're of the same opinion, or maybe you never really thought of this before, well, cool. We'll talk about it some more. So I'm going to get in the gym, have a workout, and I'll see you guys real soon. Okay, I am back from my incredible workout. Whew. Tell ya. We were talking about how I'm going to share my views on what I believe these things, because I do believe they exist. And I was telling you that I saw something so quickly. 1001, 1002. That's the most I saw it, and that was it. If you're wondering why didn't you pull over, turn around, and go try to see that creature again, I was driving. I was a passenger coming down a very steep incline, entering into California from the high mountains, from Arizona to California, high mountains, going down a steep altitude, and the next exit was quite a ways down, and what I would have to do is not only take that exit, turn around and get back on the other side of the road, but then drive back up that mountain, try to find a place an exit to take, so I could turn around and pull over on a busy freeway like that. You know, it just we drove by. I took a snapshot in my mind, and I remember it. I remember what I saw. And I know people that have seen those things as well throughout the years. I have a friend of mine that started a podcast called Sasquatch Chronicles, Wes Germer, and he and his brother both experienced these creatures while they were out in the woods. And they thought they saw everything that's out in the woods. They if anything's out there, they had seen it because they spent their lives out in the woods. And then one day their whole life changed. Both of them changed like that because of these creatures approaching them. And there was more than one that Wes and his brother had witnessed and seen, and it was terrifying for them both. I was cutting a man's hair one day. That's what I do for a living, and he was getting a haircut, and he was from Northern California. I'm from Southern California, right? And both of us had moved out to Connecticut. I did it because I was dating somebody that was from there, and I'm like, at 40 years old, I left California and went to Connecticut to start life all brand new again. And this guy, he was a doctor, and he had a job offer that he just didn't refuse. And so he and his wife moved to Connecticut, and one day he comes into the shop that I was working at. I was in a barber shop out there, and he came in, got his haircut from me, and we started talking about Northern California. And one day when he came in, I was talking about how there was a news crew close by. Not a news crew, but there was a television show crew. They were filming Finding Bigfoot for, I think it's Discovery Channel that used to do that show. Maybe they still do, play reruns or something, but it was called Finding Bigfoot. And because some locals had filmed something on they didn't mean to. It was just they were riding motorcycles in their yard. They built like a motorcycle track, and these young dudes were riding their motorcycles, and you know, you see all the woods in the background on this property, and in the woods, something that estimates to be about 8 feet tall, running very human-like on 2 legs, upright on 2 legs, runs by. And it was in the background of the film that because they were filming each other riding motorcycles. I don't remember how long it took them to realize, hey, there's something in the background. What is that? And then they turned the evidence in to be checked out, and enough to where Finding Bigfoot guys came out there to investigate. And so this guy whose hair I was cutting, his name was Mike, just like me. You know, I was telling him, well, the Finding Bigfoot guys are here filming a show, and he says, those things are real. He says, I'm a doctor, I'm a scientist. I only believe in what can be proven. If I don't see it, I'm not going to believe it. Like, he started talking about God and UFOs, and he was raised in a very religious house. I don't remember what denomination of some form of Christianity. It wasn't Jehovah's Witnesses, I'd remember that, because that's my background. But he came out of something, and I guess it got him so down that he just stopped believing in the existence of God at all, if he ever really did believe. But he's like, if I don't see it, I can't believe it. If you can't prove it scientifically. But he said that him and his friend, a guy that worked with him, they were hiking in the where are those mountains? The Sierras. Hiking in the Sierras, and he said that in the distance they saw this big guy. And if you know what a ghillie suit is, it's one of those things that you see that people wear to camouflage themselves, to make themselves look like a bush or something. It's a ghillie suit. And it looked like this guy in the distance had a ghillie suit on, and he was super, super tall, the tallest dude they ever seen. They're like, man. I mean, he said, a guy looked, he had to have been at least 9 feet tall, and the dude was jumping from one boulder to the next boulder. And he said these boulders looked like they're 15, 20 feet across. So he and his friend thought that there must be a film crew around here. They're making a movie or something, because this is a stunt man, and he must be on cables, but they are looking like, what kind of cables are gonna hold him up? There's no helicopter around. All these thoughts are going fast. Like, how's he doing this extreme athleticism? And they took out their flip phones, because that's what they had, flip phones back then, and tried to film this thing. And he says it's just like this little dot. It's what people call a blob squatch, because it just looks like a blurry dot. Well, what they were seeing with their eyes and what their flip phones were recording are quite different. But they filmed this whole thing because they were thinking it was some Hollywood thing, like they were gonna walk up on a film crew, and they slowly walked in that direction, and eventually that guy was nowhere to be found. That dude that was rock jumping in a ghillie suit, so they thought, this giant man. And when they got over there was no film crew, no evidence of anybody being around. But he said those boulders were huge. And he says, and this thing was leaping from one boulder to the next like it was nothing. And he says, Mike, they were like 20 feet apart, 15 to 20 feet apart. And he says, and from the way the guy was standing, what we estimate is he had to be about 9 feet tall, which is ridiculous. Ridiculous, you guys. A 9-foot hairy being doing athletic stuff. It's pretty incredible. I've met more people in real life too, in person, that have told me about their experiences. But I just want to share with you, why am I even speaking about this subject right now? Well, Jesus said, as in the days of Noah, the world would be in the kind of conditions that it was in the days of Noah. And in the days of Noah, there were beings that looked human, but they had a mixture of DNA, and they were ginormous. Now, because the earth was filled with these beings, and according to Enoch, there were other beings as well, because these angelic beings, these messengers called watchers, had tampered with the DNA of living things to create their own world, perhaps, yeah, to stop the blood of the Messiah coming through. If they can have corrupted DNA everywhere, well, do you think the Messiah is going to be born through that? Right? No. Why did they do it? Did they make other creatures for food for their children? Because their children were so huge and the food was running out. People couldn't sustain these giants. So what happens? Maybe their fathers create animals that are huge to feed their children. So they got big dinosaur animals, right? Maybe vicious ones like T-Rex and such are guard dogs for them in a way. They're pets. And you never know. I'm just guessing things. I'm supposing this is what this is about. But I want to tell you, there's things that stick to my mind. Like, years ago, I remember after getting out of the Jehovah's Witnesses religion, doing a little bit of studying about the Antichrist. And I remember somebody I was at a Bible study group, and this guy that was leading it, we had a talk, and, he told me that from his studies, Antichrist is going to come from Turkey. He's called the Assyrian. Now listen, there's two beings in Revelation that are going to come. We're not talking about the two witnesses. There's going to be two other beings. There's a false prophet and a lawless one. False prophet and a lawless one. And this lawless one, is it a person? Is it an idea? Is it a spirit? Well, there's spiritual things going on behind both, right? These beings. One of them is going to come from, I believe, Turkey. I know a lot of people say Russia or a revised Roman Empire. They can prove it. Maybe you can prove it for one of the guys that's coming, but there's going to be a package of two coming. And they're going to unite to work together, and they're going to be backed up by the devil himself, Hasatan. So, one of these beings, the Assyrian, will come from Turkey, I believe. And I believe he's the one that's going to go into Israel and offer a peace treaty of some sort and get them to take a mark, and the rest of that story. And it'll spread throughout the world like a starts with a V. So back to why these things might exist, what they are, who they are. In the days of Noah, God flooded the abominations, but the book of Genesis said that there was Nephilim on the earth in those days and also after the flood. Now, I believe Nephilim to be just an old way of saying hybrid, right? So a hybrid could be in the animal kingdom, right? It could be in the human/angelic kingdom. And so I believe that, if you want to put Nephilim animal type creatures in the mix as Nephilim, perhaps yes, even though, there's many studies on Nephilim. They were known to be gods and kings. And I'm sure, people worship animals and make gods out of animals as well, but is Sasquatch, are these beings animals? Are they human? Are they a little bit of angel, human, and animal? Right? Maybe they're Angmenos, angel, man, animal, angmenol. What kind of animal would be mixed up in there? I was sharing how things stick with me, and I remember the Antichrist just stuck with me, that he would be from Turkey. And I could be wrong. That guy could be wrong, but it stuck with me all these years for some reason, to where for some reason that just, I'm like, that's right. That's how I see it, you know, but I'm not teaching it and making sure that everybody else believes it too, because I don't know. I'm just supposing it could be the case. But I remember years ago hearing something, the study of the DNA of these creatures, because there is samples of DNA, blood. Whether you want to believe it or not, it's out there. There are people that have studied it. And I remember years ago hearing the closest thing to the animal kingdom that blood matches was a lemur monkey. Lemur. And if you look up lemur, they don't really look like much. They're not that big. Very unique. But supposedly that was the closest thing in the animal kingdom, but also it seems like they had human. The mother side of this being is human. The father side of this being is unknown. Father unknown. Mother human. Add a touch of perhaps lemur. Lemur. Right? Now these guys, if they have this angelic DNA, I'm sure these things are going to get huge. They're going to be strong, and perhaps they come with a little bit of that supernatural to them, right? And listen, it is crazy when you hear some of these stories of people that swear that these things were doing something that just seemed supernatural. And maybe you're somebody that has witnessed these things, and that is the case for you as well. But I'm just sharing it because it's something to think about. I believe these things are real. I believe these things are going to manifest just like in the skies. I believe there's things that are going to manifest in the air. I believe things are going to manifest in the sea. And I believe things are going to manifest here on the earth. And I believe these things are going to be what we call cryptids. Comes from the Greek word kryptos, which means secret or hidden. And I believe there will be a manifestation, an unveiling of these things more and more. But I believe with this manifestation and this unveiling, there will be deception that follows. They're not going to tell you the truth about these things. You're going to have to get the truth from God and His Word. And even look into sources such as Enoch, right? Just a little background history. I mean, you know, the scriptures don't describe how all the apostles die. What happened to every one of them? You can't find that in the Bible, every one of the apostles, how they died, but you can find it through history, historians, and there's beliefs about how Peter and John and James and all these guys, how they died, right? We rely on other sources that might not be in the Bible. And Enoch, one of the very first words of the book of Enoch, you know, and I know there's different books in the book of Enoch and all that, but the first book of Enoch, it starts out saying this book is to be sealed up until a time distant in the future, right? Jesus, you might hear him call it the last days. So I believe it's time to look into these things. And hey, if people look to the world for explanations, their governments, their religious leaders, the media, they're going to get snowed. They're going to get fooled. And if people that call themselves Christians or believers have zero answers, won't even look into the possibility of this stuff, then you're missing out, you guys. Because if God's Spirit in you, maybe God's Spirit can move you into being able to give an explanation for these things. Right? Anyway, that's it. I got to get going. I hope you enjoyed this message. Love you all. Something to think about. You might think I'm cuckoo and I'm unsubbing from this guy. That's cool too. Whatever. But anyway, I hope you have a great day. We'll talk to you next time.